The Galactic fleet hovered in Earth's orbit, an imposing, cold, and efficient machine of destruction. They had come with no warning, just as they had with dozens of other planets. Their mission was simple: conquest or annihilation. For civilizations before Earth, surrender was often not even an option. Entire star systems had been reduced to ash, their inhabitants obliterated without a chance to plead for mercy. The fleet, a mass of shimmering black ships, moved like a swarm of locusts, consuming everything in their path. Earth was next. On the surface, chaos spread as people gazed up at the sky, their eyes filled with a mix of terror and disbelief. Global defense systems activated, but the world's leaders knew the truth: Earth was hopelessly outmatched. The Galactic fleet had wiped out entire planetary defenses in seconds. Earth's meager weapons, a combination of nuclear missiles, high-energy lasers, and defense satellites, were laughable compared to the devastating firepower of the invaders. The first volley from Earth's defense forces was a futile gesture of defiance. Missiles streaked through the sky, directed at the nearest ship, only to be intercepted by energy shields so advanced they might as well have been magical. Humanity had known fear before, but this was different. This was inevitable. The fleet retaliated, raining down a barrage of energy blasts that reduced entire cities to rubble within moments. The destruction was total. Nothing was left but scorched earth, and the humans below could only watch in horror. In a secret underground bunker, hidden deep beneath the Swiss Alps, a group of the world's top leaders, scientists, and military strategists convened. The mood was grim. Satellite images showed the fleet's slow, methodical approach. Every strategy they had, every countermeasure, had already been considered and dismissed. Nothing could stop this invasion. "We're out of options," General Hale said, his voice gruff, his eyes sunken from days without sleep. The air in the room was thick with defeat. But in the corner of the room, Dr. Miriam Adler, a historian specializing in ancient Earth lore, cleared her throat. "There might be one last option," she said softly, her words cutting through the tension. All eyes turned to her. "This isn't a time for myths." A politician scoffed, but she held her ground. "Have you ever wondered why Earth, despite being technologically inferior to other civilizations, has remained untouched for so long?" Adler asked. "There's an ancient legend of protectors, beings that live beneath our feet in the hollow earth. They are called the Yetis. Powerful, ancient warriors who have defended Earth from extraterrestrial threats for millennia." The room fell silent. Most of them thought she was insane, but desperation made people listen to things they would normally dismiss. "We have nothing to lose," she added quietly. General Hale was the first to break the silence. "What do you need?" The operation to summon the Yetis began immediately. Special forces were mobilized to remote corners of the world, deep into the icy mountains of the Himalayas, where the entrance to the hollow earth was rumored to be hidden. It was a race against time, as more cities fell under the Galactic fleet's relentless assault. Teams of elite soldiers, scientists, and explorers ventured into the unknown, following the ancient maps and texts that Dr. Adler had spent her career studying. The deeper they went, the more they realized that the legends might be true. Strange carvings and symbols lined the caves, depicting battles between otherworldly creatures and powerful, giant beings. It wasn't long before the team reached a massive, hidden door carved into the side of a mountain, pulsing with an eerie, ancient energy. This was it, the doorway to the hollow earth. With a deep breath, the team leader, Captain Jameson, gave the order to open the door. As they did, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and a deep, rumbling growl echoed from within. The legends were real. The Yetis, Earth's ancient guardians, had awakened. The door creaked open, revealing a dark tunnel leading into the depths of the earth. The air was thick and heavy, and the silence that followed the echo of the door's movement was almost oppressive. The team hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. As they ventured deeper, the temperature began to rise, and the walls of the tunnel gave way to massive caverns lined with strange crystals that pulsed with a faint glow. Captain Jameson kept his team moving forward, their steps cautious but determined. The deeper they went, the more they began to feel a presence, as if they were being watched. Shadows seemed to shift in the corners of their vision, but no one dared to speak of it. They knew they were no longer alone. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into an immense underground chamber, the ceiling so high it vanished into the darkness. Towering structures made of stone and crystal dominated the landscape, unlike anything they had ever seen on the surface. The architecture was both ancient and otherworldly, a testament to a civilization far older than humanity itself. This was the Yeti City. Before the team could fully grasp the magnitude of what they had discovered, a low growl echoed through the chamber, vibrating through the very ground they stood on. Massive figures began to emerge from the shadows, Yetis, larger than any creature they had imagined, their fur gleaming white in the faint light. They moved with a primal grace, their eyes glowing with intelligence and an ancient wisdom. The team instinctively raised their weapons, but Captain Jameson quickly signaled them to lower them. This wasn't a moment for hostility. One of the Yetis, larger than the rest, stepped forward, its eyes locking onto the humans with a piercing gaze. It spoke, not in words, but in a deep rumble that resonated through the minds of the team. It was a language of thought, of pure understanding, bypassing speech altogether. The Yeti leader conveyed its message clearly. They knew why the humans had come. They had been waiting. Dr. Adler stepped forward, her heart pounding but her mind clear. "We need your help. The Galactic fleet is destroying our world. We cannot defeat them alone." The Yeti leader's expression didn't change, but the atmosphere around them seemed to shift, a heavy weight settling over the team. They had come to plead for the aid of beings who had protected Earth for millennia, and yet they had no idea what price that aid might come with. The Yeti leader, still communicating through thought, revealed that they had indeed defended Earth in the past, but they had retreated into the hollow Earth after humanity had forgotten them, after the balance they once maintained had been disrupted by human greed and war. The Yetis had watched as humans grew more advanced, more destructive, and had decided to remain hidden, waiting for a time when their intervention would be necessary once again. And now, that time had come. The Yeti leader stepped aside, revealing a massive stone altar behind him, engraved with symbols that none of the team could decipher. The leader gestured toward it, and the symbols began to glow, ancient magic awakening after centuries of dormancy. The ground trembled slightly as the energy from the altar surged through the air, connecting the Yetis to the very core of the Earth itself. They were the planet's true protectors, wielding powers far beyond human comprehension. The Yeti's strength came not only from their physical prowess but from their deep connection to the planet, to its elements, its life force. They could call upon the very Earth to rise up in defense of their home. But the Yeti leader's next thought was clear: their help came at a cost. The balance must be restored. Humanity had lost its way, and the Yetis would not fight for a world that had forsaken its protectors. They would aid in the battle against the Galactic fleet, but only if the humans pledged to honor the Earth, to restore the balance that had been lost. Captain Jameson, without hesitation, made the pledge. There was no time for debate, no room for doubt. Humanity's survival was at stake, and the future would be meaningless if they didn't act now. Dr. Adler nodded in agreement, understanding the weight of the promise they were making. With that, the Yeti leader turned, gesturing for his warriors to follow. The ground beneath them began to shift, creating a path leading further into the city. The team followed, their sense of awe only growing as they moved deeper into the heart of the hollow Earth. They were led to an enormous underground lake, its waters glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. This was the source of the Yeti's power, a conduit to the Earth's elemental forces. The Yeti warriors began their preparations, gathering around the lake, their hands raised as they summoned the elemental energies. The air crackled with power, and the ground shook as the Yetis harnessed the forces of nature itself. Massive boulders rose from the ground, swirling in the air as if weightless, while the water from the lake surged upwards, forming into towering waves that hovered in the air, waiting to be unleashed. Captain Jameson and his team watched in awe, realizing that they had only scratched the surface of the Yeti's true abilities. These beings were not just protectors, they were the embodiment of the Earth's raw power. With their help, humanity might just stand a chance against the Galactic fleet. As the preparations continued, the Yeti leader turned to the humans once more, sending one final thought. The battle ahead would be unlike anything they had ever faced. The Galactic fleet's technology was formidable, but it lacked the one thing the Yetis had, the very soul of the planet itself. Together, they would make their stand. The Yetis moved with precision, their massive forms hardly making a sound despite their size. The air was charged with energy as they marched toward the surface, their connection to the Earth intensifying with each step. Captain Jameson's team followed closely, feeling the ground vibrate beneath their feet. It was as though the very planet was waking up, responding to the call of its ancient protectors. Every step the Yetis took left a mark, as though the Earth itself was reinforcing their power. As they approached the surface, the Galactic fleet began its assault in full force. Explosions rocked the skies, and energy beams lanced toward the ground, obliterating anything they touched. Human cities were under siege, their defenses crumbling. Yet, as the Yeti warriors emerged from the Earth, the tide of the battle began to shift. The first Yeti raised its massive hand, and with a single motion, the ground beneath the advancing alien machines erupted. Jagged stone pillars shot upward, impaling the fleet's ground forces, splitting their mechanical forms apart with ease. The Earth itself seemed to be fighting back now, responding to the will of its ancient guardians. What once looked like an unstoppable invasion force was now struggling to maintain its ground assault as the Yetis tore through their ranks with brutal efficiency. Meanwhile, the Galactic fleet, high above in their ships, monitored the sudden resistance. They had conquered countless planets, but never had they seen anything like this. The technology they relied on, so far advanced compared to any other species they had encountered, was proving ineffective against creatures that wielded the raw power of a planet. The Yetis were not merely strong, they commanded the very elements, turning the battlefield into a living weapon. The invaders' tactics, based on precision and overwhelming firepower, were being met with a chaotic force they could not predict or control. Yet, the fleet adapted quickly. Their ships deployed more sophisticated drones, equipped with shields and advanced weaponry. The drones swarmed down, engaging the Yetis in coordinated attacks, hoping to outflank them and overwhelm their numbers. Captain Jameson watched from a nearby ridge, his heart pounding. The Yetis were powerful, but the enemy's sheer numbers were starting to press them. He could see the tension in the air as explosions and plasma blasts filled the skies. But the Yetis had more to reveal. One of the Yeti warriors, standing atop a crumbling hill, raised both arms toward the sky. The air around him seemed to hum, the ground trembling beneath his feet. And then, in an instant, the temperature dropped. The air filled with frost as a blizzard descended out of nowhere, conjured by the Yeti's will. The drone's advanced systems faltered as ice coated their mechanisms, freezing them mid-flight before they crashed to the ground, shattering like glass. The storm raged across the battlefield, turning the once green terrain into an icy wasteland. In the chaos, human forces found their moment to strike. Using the cover of the storm, Earth's remaining military forces launched a coordinated attack from hidden bases. Fighter jets and missile systems, while primitive compared to the Galactic fleet's technology, targeted vulnerable spots in the alien formations. They aimed not for direct destruction but to create chaos and confusion, hitting communication hubs and weakening the coordination between the ships. As the battle raged, the Yeti leader, towering above the rest, summoned a force even greater. The ground beneath the main fleet's command ship began to shake violently. The Earth's crust cracked open, and from the depths emerged massive tendrils of magma, twisting upward like serpents. The Yeti leader had tapped into the Earth's core, unleashing a force of nature that no technology could withstand. The molten tendrils wrapped around the fleet's largest ships, crushing their hulls and melting their advanced alloys as though they were nothing more than fragile toys. In the midst of this, Captain Jameson received a transmission from Earth's command center. The Galactic fleet was preparing to deploy its most devastating weapon, a massive energy bomb capable of destroying the planet itself. They had realized that conventional attacks would not be enough to stop the Yetis and were willing to risk the destruction of Earth to eliminate this threat. The bomb was being readied in their flagship, positioned far above the battlefield, out of reach of even the Yeti's power. Dr. Adler, standing beside Jameson, quickly assessed the situation. "We have to find a way to stop that bomb. If they release it, nothing we've done here will matter. The Yetis can't stop it from down here." Jameson knew she was right. They needed to act fast. But how could they reach a ship that far out of reach? The Yeti leader, as if sensing their thoughts, turned to Jameson. Without words, a plan formed in their minds. The Yetis had one last power, one last connection to the earth that they had yet to reveal. They could call upon the very air itself. The Yeti leader's eyes glowed with an intense, otherworldly light as he raised his arms once more. The winds began to swirl, gathering into a concentrated force. As the winds intensified, the Yetis began to move, their massive forms lifted into the air by the force of the Earth's own breath. It was an incredible sight, these massive beings, carried by the wind, rising toward the sky, toward the Galactic Fleet's flagship. Jameson and his team watched in awe as the Yetis soared higher and higher, closing the distance between them and the enemy's ultimate weapon. The flagship, realizing what was happening, unleashed everything it had. Energy blasts and plasma beams filled the sky, but the Yetis, propelled by the raw power of the wind, dodged and weaved with unnatural speed. The closer they got, the more desperate the fleet became. But it was too late. The Yeti leader, with one final burst of energy, reached the flagship. His massive hands, glowing with the power of the earth, slammed into the bomb's outer casing. The energy bomb, which had been designed to destroy planets, could not withstand the elemental power of the Yetis. The bomb's core, already unstable, detonated, but instead of exploding outward, the Yeti leader directed its energy into the void, away from Earth. The flagship was torn apart in the process, along with the Yeti leader himself, but the planet was saved. As the debris from the Galactic Fleet's flagship fell to Earth, the remaining ships, without their central command, began to retreat. They had underestimated Earth, and they had paid the price. The Yetis, now grounded once more, stood victorious, their connection to the planet stronger than ever. Humanity, watching from below, knew they owed their survival not just to the Yetis, but to the Earth itself. The battle was won, but the bond between the humans and their ancient protectors had been restored. Together, they would ensure that Earth would never fall. The sky was littered with the wreckage of fallen ships, and yet the Galactic Fleet was far from finished. Despite the Yeti's incredible display of power, the fleet had regrouped, gathering its forces for one final assault. Above the battlefield, the last and most dangerous of their warships remained, a colossal vessel brimming with untold destructive potential. The Yetis and humans had managed to survive the first wave, but the real test was about to begin. Reports from Earth's military command revealed the terrifying truth. The Galactic Fleet had activated a planet-destroying superbomb, an energy weapon capable of wiping out Earth in one strike. It was housed aboard the largest of the fleet's remaining ships, currently positioning itself high above the atmosphere, readying to release its payload. The clock was ticking. Captain Jameson's face was grim as the information came through. He glanced at Dr. Adler, who had been monitoring communications from their makeshift command post. "This is it," he muttered, gripping his weapon tightly. "If that bomb goes off, everything we've fought for means nothing. We don't have much time," Dr. Adler replied, her voice steady despite the overwhelming dread that hung over them. "We need the Yetis to strike now. If we wait any longer, it's all over." Jameson nodded, turning to the Yeti leader who stood tall and unwavering beside them. The leader's glowing eyes fixed on the humans for a brief moment, as if already knowing what needed to be done. The Yeti let out a deep, resonant growl that rippled through the air, summoning his warriors to prepare for the final push. They had been readying themselves, knowing full well that the Galactic Fleet was far from defeated. The Yeti leader raised his arms once more, calling upon the elemental forces that had protected them for centuries. This time, the Earth itself responded with a furious intensity, as if aware that its very existence was hanging in the balance. Tremors shook the ground, and the skies darkened as massive storm clouds began to form overhead. The Yeti's connection to the planet was stronger than ever, and with the full might of Earth's forces at their disposal, they prepared for one last stand. But even with all this power, they faced a new kind of threat. The superbomb was unlike anything they had encountered before. Its destructive force was beyond even the Yeti's understanding. It was not merely a weapon, it was the Galactic Fleet's ultimate expression of dominance, a device designed to end entire worlds in a single stroke. The Yeti leader, sensing the magnitude of the challenge, communicated a final thought to Jameson and his team. This battle would require a sacrifice greater than any before. To stop the bomb, the Yeti leader would need to draw upon the Earth's core itself, tapping into the very heart of the planet. But this would come at a terrible cost, one that would ensure the Yeti's victory but would also take their leader's life. Jameson's heart sank as the realization hit him. "You're saying you'll die?" The Yeti leader's gaze did not waver. He understood what had to be done. The survival of the planet, the preservation of life itself, depended on this one moment. There was no room for hesitation. With a final nod, the Yeti leader turned away, gathering his warriors for the final ascent. As the storm clouds swirled overhead, the Yetis once again took to the sky, lifted by the elemental forces they commanded. This time, they soared higher than before, rising above the clouds, toward the Galactic Fleet's flagship and the deadly superbomb that hovered ominously in space. The fleet, sensing the Yeti's approach, unleashed a barrage of energy weapons, but the Yetis pressed on, unyielding. The flagship was surrounded by a shimmering energy shield, an impenetrable barrier designed to protect it from any outside interference. But the Yeti leader, now fully attuned to the Earth's elemental powers, channeled the raw energy of the planet's core. His massive hands glowed with an intense, molten light as he approached the shield. With a mighty roar that echoed through the atmosphere, he struck the shield with all his strength. The impact was cataclysmic. The shield cracked under the pressure, faltering as the Yeti leader's power surged through it. Molten tendrils of magma shot out from the ground below, wrapping around the flagship, crushing its hull as if it were made of glass. The shield flickered, then collapsed, leaving the flagship vulnerable. But even as the flagship crumbled, the superbomb remained intact, its deadly countdown ticking away. The Yeti leader knew this was the moment. He had one chance to stop it. Drawing upon the full force of the Earth's core, the Yeti leader focused all his remaining energy into a single, devastating strike. The ground beneath him erupted in a massive surge of power, a beam of molten energy shooting upward, enveloping the bomb in a blinding light. The bomb, already unstable, began to disintegrate under the immense pressure. The energy it had stored for destruction was redirected, siphoned off into the void. The flagship erupted in a massive explosion, the shockwave rippling across the sky. But the superbomb had been neutralized. Its energy was diffused, harmlessly scattered into the stars. On the ground below, the remaining ships of the Galactic Fleet, now leaderless and without their ultimate weapon, began to retreat. They had been defeated, their invasion thwarted by the very forces of the planet they had sought to conquer. The Yetis, battered and weary, descended from the sky, victorious but not unscathed. But the Yeti leader was gone. As the dust settled, Captain Jameson and his team stood in silence, watching as the surviving Yetis gathered around the place where their leader had made his final stand. The air was thick with the weight of their loss, but there was also a sense of profound respect. The Yeti leader had given everything to protect the Earth, just as his kind had done for millennia. And now, it was up to humanity to ensure that sacrifice was not in vain. Dr. Adler wiped a tear from her cheek as she turned to Jameson. "He knew," she said softly. "He knew this was the only way." Jameson nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the last of the Galactic Fleet's ships disappeared into the distance. "They saved us," he replied, his voice filled with a quiet reverence. "But now it's up to us to keep the balance." The Yetis had restored the balance of the Earth, but it was a fragile piece. Humanity had been given a second chance, and this time, they could not afford to squander it. The connection between the Earth and its ancient protectors had been reforged, but it was up to humanity to honor that bond, to protect the planet just as the Yetis had done. The battle was over, but the future remained uncertain.